She stood in the terminal, clutching a plastic bag of old clothes, while her ex-husband laughed, waving the divorce papers that left her with nothing but debt. Ryan thought he had won. He thought stripping Stella of her dignity in Courtroom 4B was the final nail in her coffin. He didn't know that the private jet tarmac he was staring at didn't belong to the airline, it belonged to her father. The woman he mocked as a gold digger was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life, and by the time they landed, his entire world would be burned to ash. This is the story of how a billionaire heiress played the long game. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. Or perhaps that was just the residual stress radiating from Stella Jenkins's temples. She sat on a rigid grey airport chair near Gate B32, staring at the scuffed toes of her boots. They were old, 3 years old to be precise, bought during the second year of her marriage to Ryan, back when he still pretended to care about things like her birthday. Across the waiting area near the floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view of the overcast New York skyline, stood Ryan Sterling. He looked immaculate in a bespoke navy suit, the kind that cost more than Stella's car. Hanging on his arm like a designer accessory was Jessica, his fiancée. She was 23, glowing with the arrogance of someone who had never heard the word no, and currently flashing a diamond engagement ring that caught the terminal light like a strobe. They were laughing, loudly. "Did you see her face, Richie?" Jessica giggled, her voice carrying over the low murmur of fellow travelers. "When the judge read the alimony ruling, I thought she was going to faint." Ryan smirked, adjusting his silk tie. "She's lucky she got to keep her maiden name. My lawyers destroyed her. Irreconcilable differences is legal speak for I'm tired of supporting a dead weight." Stella tightened her grip on her carry-on bag. It had been less than 3 hours since they stepped out of the Manhattan family court. The proceedings had been brutal. Ryan's legal team, led by the ruthless shark Arthur Miller. No relation to the playwright, but certainly fond of tragedy, had painted Stella as a leech. They claimed she had contributed nothing to Ryan's tech consulting firm, Sterling Solutions, despite the fact that she had written the original business plan on the back of napkins in their studio apartment 5 years ago. The judge, a tired man who seemed eager for his lunch break, had ruled in Ryan's favor. Stella received no alimony, no shares in the company, and was ordered to vacate their penthouse by the end of the month. She walked away with exactly what she had entered the marriage, with nothing. Or so they thought. "Excuse me," a weary traveler muttered, brushing past Stella's knees with a heavy backpack. "Sorry," Stella whispered, pulling her legs in. She looked small, defeated. She wore a simple beige trench coat and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. To the casual observer, she looked like a woman fleeing a disaster. "Look at her," Ryan said, his voice dropping an octave, but still perfectly audible to Stella. He gestured with his chin. "Sitting there like a stray dog. I almost feel bad." "Almost." Jessica snorted. "Where is she even going? I thought she couldn't afford a subway ticket, let alone a flight." "Probably flying Spirit to her mother's trailer in Ohio." Ryan chuckled. "I heard she maxed out her credit cards paying for that incompetent public defender." Stella closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Let them talk, she told herself. Just a few more hours. She wasn't going to Ohio, and her mother didn't live in a trailer. Her mother had passed away 10 years ago in Zurich. Stella was flying to Geneva. The gate agent picked up the microphone. "Attention passengers on flight 189 to Geneva. We are experiencing a slight delay in boarding due to a cabin preparation issue. We apologize for the inconvenience." A collective groan rippled through the economy seating area. Ryan, however, marched up to the counter, slamming his platinum frequent flyer card down. "This is unacceptable," Ryan barked at the young female agent whose name tag read Kelly. "I have a meeting in Geneva tomorrow morning with the Van der Hoven group. I cannot be delayed." Stella's eyes snapped open at the name. Van der Hoven. "I understand, sir," Kelly said patiently, "but the aircraft isn't ready. Even first class has to wait." "Do you know who I am?" Ryan leaned over the counter, his voice rising. "I am the CEO of Sterling Solutions. I am on the verge of closing a merger that will put me on the cover of Forbes. If I miss this meeting because of your incompetence, I will buy this airline just to fire you." Kelly blinked clearly, unimpressed but professionally polite. "Sir, please step back." Jessica chimed in, leaning against Ryan's shoulder. "Babe, don't waste your breath on the help. Let's just go to the lounge. The air out here is stale." She cast a pointed, sneering look toward Stella. Stella stood up. She needed to walk. She needed water. As she moved toward the kiosk, she had to pass them. "Well, well." Ryan stepped into her path, blocking her way. He loomed over her, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Leaving town to lick your wounds." "Stella." "Let me pass, Ryan," Stella said quietly. "I hope you're not following us." Jessica smirked, looking Stella up and down with distaste. "Because this is a business trip. High stakes, sophisticated people. Not really your scene." "I have no interest in your business, Jessica," Stella replied, her voice steady. "That's good," Ryan sneered. "Because you wouldn't understand it anyway. You never had the head for business. That's why I had to cut you loose. I need a partner who fits the image. Someone with pedigree." Stella looked him in the eye. For a second, the mask of the defeated ex-wife slipped, revealing a flash of steel-cold amusement. "Pedigree is funny thing, Ryan. Sometimes the loudest dogs have the worst breeding." Ryan's face reddened. "Watch your mouth. You're nobody. You're a broke, divorced nobody. I gave you a life, and you squandered it. Enjoy economy. I hear the toilets are right next to the back row." He grabbed Jessica's hand and stormed off toward the VIP lounge, bumping Stella's shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Stella watched them go. She reached into her pocket and touched the heavy, embossed card holder she had kept hidden for 5 years. She pulled it out slightly, just enough to see the gold crest on the black metal card inside. It wasn't a credit card. It was a security clearance ID. The name on the card didn't say Stella Jenkins. It said Stella Van der Hoven. "Boarding will commence in 10 minutes. The intercom crackled. Stella put the card away and smiled. Ryan was flying to meet the Van der Hoven group to beg for funding. He didn't know he had just divorced the chairman's only daughter, and the meeting wasn't going to be in a boardroom. It was going to start at 30,000 feet. The boarding process for Flight 189 was chaotic. A snowstorm was brewing over the Atlantic, and the airline was rushing to get the plane off the ground before the tarmac froze over. The economy line snaked around the terminal pillars, a mass of tired bodies and crying infants. Ryan and Jessica naturally bypassed the herd. They strutted through the priority access lane, Ryan holding his head high, ensuring everyone saw his status. He handed his boarding pass to the attendant, not even looking at her. "Zone 1, Seat 2A and 2B, Ryan announced. "Make sure our coats are hung up immediately." He stepped onto the jet bridge, feeling the rush of adrenaline that came with superiority. This trip was everything. The Van der Hoeven deal was worth $400 million. Cornelius van der Hoeven, the reclusive European tycoon, was looking for a US partner for his tech infrastructure. Ryan had leveraged everything his company, his personal assets, even the liquidity from the divorce to position himself for this. If he signed the deal, he was a king. If he failed, he was bankrupt. But Ryan Sterling didn't fail. He and Jessica settled into the plush leather seats of first class. He accepted a glass of pre-flight champagne, kicking his legs out. "To us," Jessica cooed, clinking her glass against his. "And to the X, rotting in row 45. Ryan laughed. "To the X." The plane began to fill. Passengers shuffled past them, casting envious glances at their champagne. Ryan ignored them, scrolling through his presentation on his tablet. Then he saw her. Stella walked onto the plane, but she wasn't shuffling with the masses. She walked in with a strange, calm purpose. She was holding her boarding pass, but she stopped at the galley entrance, where the purser, a stern woman named Marianne, was directing traffic. Ryan watched, amused. "Look," he whispered to Jessica. "She's probably trying to beg for an upgrade. Watch her get shut down." They watched as Stella handed her ticket to Marianne. The purser glanced at it, and then her entire demeanor changed. She straightened up, her eyes widening. She looked at Stella, then back at the ticket, then at a tablet in her hand. Marianne didn't point Stella toward the back of the plane. Instead, she gestured toward the front, specifically toward the ultra-exclusive private suite at the very nose of the aircraft, a section usually reserved for diplomats or royalty, separated by a heavy velvet curtain, even from first class. Ryan frowned. "Wait a minute." He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, leaning into the aisle just as Stella approached his row. "Where do you think you're going?" Ryan demanded, blocking the aisle. Stella paused, looking at him with mild disinterest. "To my seat, Ryan." "Your seat?" He laughed incredulously. "Economy is that way." He pointed backward. "The cockpit is this way. Unless you're flying the plane now, you're lost." "Sir, please take your seat." Marianne the purser stepped in immediately, her voice sharp. "I'm just trying to help this passenger find her place," Ryan said, flashing his charming smile. "She's my ex-wife. She's a little confused. She definitely doesn't have a ticket for up here." "She has a ticket exactly where she needs to be," Marianne said, stepping between them. "Ms. Jenkins, please follow me." "Ms. Jenkins," Ryan scoffed. "She's broke. She can't afford a suite. Who paid for this? Did you find a sugar daddy already?" "Stella." "That was fast." Jessica popped her head up. "Maybe she's using your credit card numbers, or Ryan. You should check." The accusation hung in the air. Passengers were starting to stare. Stella turned slowly. The flight attendant tried to usher her away, but Stella held up a hand. She stepped close to Ryan, close enough that he could see the lack of fear in her eyes. "I didn't use your money, Ryan," she said softly. "I never needed your money. And frankly, considering the state of your company's financials, which I saw during the discovery phase of the divorce, you barely have any money to steal." Ryan's face went purple. "My financials are impeccable. I am flying to meet Cornelius van der Hoeven." Stella smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Are you? Well, I'm sure he'll be very interested to hear about your behavior toward fellow passengers." "You think you can sabotage me?" Ryan hissed, lowering his voice. "You think you can call the Van der Hoeven group and lie about me? I'll sue you for defamation. I'll ruin you." "Sir." The captain's voice boomed. The pilot had stepped out of the cockpit, attracted by the commotion. He was a tall man, with silver hair. Captain Harrison. He looked at Ryan with a gaze of stone. "Sit down immediately, or you will be escorted off this aircraft." Ryan froze. Being kicked off would mean missing the meeting. He glared at Stella. "This isn't over. I don't know who you slept with to get that seat. But karma is coming for you." "I'm counting on it," Stella said. She turned and followed Marianne through the velvet curtains into the private suite. Ryan collapsed back into his seat, fuming. Unbelievable. She must have blown her entire divorce settlement on one ticket just to spite me. "It's pathetic," Jessica agreed, though she looked uneasily at the curtain. "Whatever. Once we land in Geneva and meet Mr. van der Hoven, she'll be a distant memory." The plane taxied and took off. Once they reached cruising altitude, Ryan tried to relax, but the presence of Stella just a few feet away behind that curtain gnawed at him. About an hour into the flight, the curtain parted. Ryan looked up, expecting the flight attendant. Instead, a man in a sharp grey suit stepped out from the private suite. He wasn't flight crew. He was holding a laptop and a stack of files. He looked around, first class, adjusted his glasses, and walked straight to Ryan's row. "Mr. Sterling?" the man asked. "Yes." Ryan straightened up. "Who are you?" "I'm Arthur Pendleton," the man said efficiently. "I am the chief legal counsel for the Van der Hoven Family Trust." Ryan's eyes widened. He practically scrambled to sit up straight. This was it. An envoy. "Mr. Pendleton. What an honor. I didn't know you were on board. Is this a preliminary meeting before we land?" Jessica quickly fixed her hair. "In a manner of speaking," Pendleton said dryly. He didn't offer a hand to shake. "I was actually traveling with my employer, but she requested that I speak with you regarding the merger proposal you sent last week." Ryan's heart hammered. I thought Cornelius van der Hoven retired 6 months ago due to health reasons," Pendleton said, opening a file. "Control of the conglomerate was passed entirely to his heir." I wasn't aware," Ryan stammered. "But surely the heir is interested in Sterling Solutions. Our synergy is perfect." "The chairwoman has reviewed your proposal," Pendleton said. He pulled out a document. Ryan recognized it. It was his pitch deck. "She finds the financials optimistic, and the leadership questionable." Questionable. Ryan bristled. "I built this company from nothing." "Actually," Pendleton interrupted, "the chairwoman believes the company was built on the intellectual property of a silent partner who was recently forced out without compensation." Ryan went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The chairwoman would like to discuss this with you directly," Pendleton said, stepping back and gesturing to the velvet curtain. "She is ready to see you now." Ryan gulped. This was his chance to charm the new heiress. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Of course, I can explain everything. I'm sure once she meets me, she'll understand the value I bring." He looked at Jessica. "Stay here. I'm going to close the deal." Ryan followed Pendleton down the short aisle. His palms were sweating. He pushed through the heavy velvet curtain into the private suite. It was luxurious, smelling of leather and orchids. There was a single swivel chair facing the window, looking out at the clouds. "Ma'am," Ryan said, putting on his best boardroom voice. "I'm Ryan Sterling. It is a pleasure to meet you." The chair swiveled around slowly. Ryan's smile froze. His knees buckled. Sitting there holding a crystal glass of sparkling water was Stella. "Hello, Ryan," she said, her voice ice cold. "Please take a seat. We have a lot to discuss." The silence inside the private suite was absolute, save for the low rhythmic hum of the jet engines and the soft clinking of ice against crystal as Stella swirled her water. To Ryan, however, the silence was deafening. It roared in his ears, mixed with the rushing blood of a panic he couldn't quite articulate yet. He stood frozen in the plush carpet, his hand still gripping the velvet curtain he had just pushed through. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile two impossible images: the broken, penniless woman he had crushed in court 3 hours ago, and the elegant, powerful figure sitting in the leather chair of a billionaire's flying fortress. "Stella," he whispered, his voice cracking. A nervous, incredulous laugh bubbled up from his throat. "What? What is this? Is this a joke? Did you break in here?" He looked frantically at Arthur Pendleton, the lawyer standing stoically by the wall. "Mr. Pendleton, this woman is a security risk. She's my unstable ex-wife. She must have snuck in while the attendant wasn't looking. You need to call the marshal." Arthur didn't blink. He didn't even look at Ryan. He looked at Stella. "Shall I have him removed, ma'am? Or do you wish to proceed?" Stella took a slow sip of her water, her eyes never leaving Ryan's face. "Sit down, Ryan. You look like you're about to have a stroke." "I will not sit down." Ryan snapped his face, flushing a deep, ugly red. He took a step toward her, pointing a shaking finger. "I don't know who you're sleeping with to get access to this suite. Maybe it's the pilot. Or perhaps you seduced this old man here. But this is the Van der Hoven private suite. When the real owner walks in and finds you playing pretend Ryan." Stella cut him off. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her voice had a timbre of authority he had never heard before, a steel core wrapped in velvet. "Look at the table." Ryan blinked his eyes, darting to the mahogany side table next to her chair. Sitting there in a simple silver frame was a photograph. Ryan squinted. It was an old photo, grainy and warm. It showed a younger Stella, perhaps 10 years old, standing in a vast rose garden in front of a chateau that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Standing next to her, with a hand on her shoulder, was a tall, imposing man with distinctive silver hair and a stern jawline. Ryan recognized the man instantly. Every tech CEO in the world had studied that face. It was Cornelius van der Hoven. "That's..." Ryan's mouth went dry. "That's a Photoshop. You pasted yourself in." "Turn it over," Stella said. Ryan hesitated, then reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the frame. On the back, in faded blue fountain pen ink, was an inscription: "To my little Stella bug, the future of our empire. Love, Papa, Geneva, 1998. The frame slipped from Ryan's fingers and clattered onto the table. He stumbled back his legs, hitting the leather ottoman, and he collapsed onto it, not out of obedience, but because his knees simply gave out. "No," he breathed. Your father is dead. You told me he was a watchmaker in Zurich. You told me he died broke." "I told you he made watches," Stella corrected him gently, a sad smile playing on her lips. "And he did. It was his hobby. He loved the mechanics of time. As for dying broke, no. I said he died to the world when he retired to his estate. We value privacy, Ryan. Something you never understood. But your name," Ryan stammered, his mind spinning like a hard drive, trying to read a corrupted file. "You're Stella Jenkins." "Jenkins is my mother's maiden name," Stella said. She gestured to Arthur. "Arthur, the file." Arthur Pendleton stepped forward and placed a thick leather binder on Ryan's lap. It was embossed with the Van der Hoven crest, a lion holding a key. "Stella van der Hoven," Stella said softly. "My mother was American. When they separated, She wanted to raise me away from the glare of the paparazzi, away from the kidnappers and the fortune hunters. I took her name to have a normal life, to see if I could make friends who liked me, not my inheritance, to see if I could find a husband who loved me, not my father's checkbook. She leaned forward, and for the first time her eyes flashed with genuine pain. I thought I found that with you, Ryan. For 5 years I played the part of the supportive middle-class wife. I scrubbed your floors. I cooked your meals. I wrote your business plans. I waited, Ryan. I waited for the day I could trust you enough to tell you the truth. I wanted to surprise you. I had dreams of taking you to the chateau and saying, "Look, we don't have to struggle anymore." Ryan stared at her, his mouth agape. The realization was hitting him like a physical blow. He had been married to a billionaire heiress. He had been sleeping next to a fortune that could buy countries. And he had treated her like garbage. "But you changed," Stella continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The little bit of success Sterling Solutions had, it poisoned you. You became cruel. You became greedy. And then you found Jessica." "Stella, wait," Ryan gasped, suddenly scrambling to regain his footing. The shark in him was waking up. If she was the heiress, they were still technically connected. The divorce. Wait. The divorce. Baby, listen. This is a lot to take in. But think about what we had. 5 years. We were a team. We were a team, Stella said coldly, until this morning, when you stood in court and let your lawyer call me a parasite, when you hid your assets, when you laughed at me in the terminal. That was legal strategy. Ryan pleaded, sweating profusely now. "Arthur Miller, he told me to be tough." "It wasn't me, Stella, look. I'm here for the merger. This is destiny. You and me reunited. We can combine Sterling Solutions with the Van der Hoeven Group. We can be the ultimate power couple. Jessica means nothing. She's just a flight fling. I can dump her. Right now. I'll go tell her." He made a move to stand up, a desperate, manic grin plastered on his face. Stella didn't move. She just looked at Arthur. "Show him the merger documents, Mr. Pendleton." Arthur opened the file on Ryan's lap to the first page. It wasn't a merger agreement. Ryan looked down. The bold text at the top of the page read, "Notice of forensic audit and immediate debt recall." "What is this?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. "You didn't come here to sign a merger, Ryan," Stella said, leaning back into the darkness of her seat. "You came here to explain why you shouldn't go to prison." The cabin pressure seemed to drop though the plane was cruising steadily at 38,000 feet. For Ryan Sterling, the air had simply vanished from the room. He stared at the document in his lap, the letters swimming before his eyes. "Debt recall," Ryan choked out. I don't owe the Van der Hoeven Group anything. My loans are with the First National Bank of Geneva." Arthur Pendleton adjusted his rimless glasses, looking down at Ryan with the clinical detachment of a mortician. "Mr. Sterling, you pride yourself on being a businessman, yet you lack basic due diligence. Who do you think owns First National Bank of Geneva?" Ryan froze. "No. The Van der Hoeven Family Trust acquired a controlling interest in First National 4 years ago," Arthur stated calmly. "Technically, you have been borrowing money from your wife for the vast majority of your company's existence. And you've been a terrible investment," Stella added. Her tone was conversational, which made it all the more terrifying. "Let's look at the numbers, shall we, Arthur?" Arthur flipped the page in the binder on Ryan's lap. It showed a complex graph of Sterling Solutions cash flow, It was bleeding red ink. "You portrayed your company as a rising star to the court," Stella said. "You valued it low to avoid giving me a payout claiming market volatility. But the truth is much worse, isn't it? You're insolvent, Ryan. You're floating on loans to pay off other loans. That's standard startup leveraging," Ryan protested, wiping sweat from his forehead with his silk sleeve. "Everyone does it. Uber did it. Tesla did it." "They had product," Stella countered. "You have smoke and mirrors, and you have theft." She pointed to a specific line item, highlighted in yellow project AETHER. Ryan's face went pale. Project Ether was the crown jewel of his pitch. It was an AI-driven logistics algorithm that he claimed would revolutionize shipping. It was the reason he was worth anything. "That's my proprietary technology," Ryan stammered defensively. "Is it?" Stella raised an eyebrow. "Because I seem to remember sitting at our kitchen table 3 years ago coding the core logic for Ether while you were out networking, which I now know meant drinking martinis with Jessica." "You can't prove that," Ryan hissed. "My name is on the patent." "Actually," Arthur interrupted, pulling a sleek black tablet from his briefcase and tapping the screen. "You filed for the patent, yes, but you failed to disclose that the source code contains a digital watermark, a signature, if you will." Arthur turned the tablet toward Ryan. On the screen was a stream of complex code. Arthur zoomed in on a seemingly random string of characters buried deep in the kernel. Decoded it, read SVDH. Always watching. "Stella van der Hoven," Stella translated. "I put it there the night I finished the code, just in case. I knew even then that you had a habit of taking credit for my work. I just didn't think I'd have to use it to destroy you." Ryan slumped back, defeated. The patent was void. If this came out, he wouldn't just be broke. He would be blacklisted from every boardroom in Silicon Valley. "So," Ryan whispered, his voice hoarse, "what do you want? You want to humiliate me. Congratulations. You win. Take the company. It's yours anyway." "Oh, I don't want the company," Stella said, wrinkling her nose as if he had offered her a rotten apple. "It's a shell. I'm going to liquidate it. But that's not the problem, Ryan. The problem is the personal guarantee." Ryan's eyes bulged. "The what?" "To secure your last loan, the $5 million expansion loan you took out 2 months ago to buy that penthouse, and the ring for Jessica, you signed a personal guarantee," Arthur explained. "You put up your personal assets as collateral, everything. The car, the boat, the accounts, the future earnings. I thought the company would cover it." "The company is worthless because the IP belongs to Ms. van der Hoven," Arthur said, "which means the bank, Ms. van der Hoven's bank, is calling in the personal guarantee immediately." "You can't do that," Ryan gasped. "I'll be destitute. You left me with $400 in my checking account this morning, Ryan," Stella reminded him. "You laughed when I had to take the bus to the courthouse. You told the judge I was a burden. I'm just balancing the scales." Suddenly the curtain rustled. "Ryan, what is taking so long?" Jessica stepped into the suite. She looked annoyed, holding an empty champagne glass. She froze when she saw the scene, Ryan, sweating and pale, slumped in a chair, and Stella, the mousy ex-wife, sitting like a queen in the center of the room. "What is she doing here?" Jessica demanded, pointing a manicured nail at Stella. "Ryan, tell the stewardess to get her out." Ryan didn't speak. He couldn't. "Jessica," Stella said pleasantly. "Come in. We were just discussing the wedding budget." "Excuse me," Jessica scoffed. "My wedding is going to be the event of the season. Not that you're invited." Ryan, seriously, why is she here? Ryan isn't paying for the wedding, Jessica. Stella said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Ryan isn't paying for anything. In fact, as of about 5 minutes ago, Ryan doesn't own the suit he's wearing. Jessica looked at Ryan, confusion morphing into suspicion. Richie. What is she talking about? Tell her Ryan, Stella commanded. Ryan looked up at his fiancée. He saw the calculation in her eyes. He realized with a sinking heart that she looked at him the same way he had looked at Stella earlier that day, as a dead weight. The deal, Ryan croaked. The deal isn't happening, Jess. What do you mean? Jessica's voice shrilled. We're flying to Geneva, the Van der Hoeven Group. I am the Van der Hoeven Group, Stella announced. Jessica stopped. She looked at Stella, then at the luxury of the suite, then at the terrified lawyer, and finally at the broken man in the chair. The gears in her head turned slowly, then clicked into place. You, Jessica whispered. You're the heiress. And Ryan, Stella continued ruthlessly, is currently in default on about $12 million of debt owed to my family. He has no company. He has no penthouse. He has no money. Stella leaned forward, locking eyes with the young woman. So, Jessica, the question is, how much do you really love him? Because if you marry him, you're marrying his debt. You'll be spending your 20s paying off his mistakes. Is the ring worth it? Jessica looked down at the massive diamond on her finger. She twisted it, the metal suddenly feeling heavy. He told me he was worth $50 million, Jessica said, her voice quiet. He lied, Stella said. Jessica looked at Ryan. There was no love in her eyes anymore, only disgust. You lied to me. You told me I was set for life. Jess, please, Ryan begged, reaching for her hand. We can figure this out. I'm still me. You're a fraud, Jessica spat, yanking her hand away. She turned to Stella. I didn't know, I swear. He told me you were crazy. He told me you were dragging him down. I know what he told you, Stella said. He's very good at stories. I'm not going down with him, Jessica said firmly. She began to pull the engagement ring off her finger. It was tight and she tugged at it violently until it popped loose. She threw the ring at Ryan. It bounced off his chest and landed on the carpet. I'm done, Jessica said. I'm going back to my seat. Actually, Stella interjected, you're in seat 2B. That seat was purchased with a company credit card that has just been frozen. Technically, you don't have a ticket. Jessica's jaw dropped. You're kicking me off the plane. We're over the Atlantic. No. Stella smiled. I'm not a monster, but first class is for paying customers. Marianne. The purser appeared instantly at the curtain, as if she had been waiting. Yes, Ms. Van der Hoeven. Ms. Jessica and Mr. Sterling need to be relocated, Stella said calmly. I believe there are 2 middle seats available in the last row, near the lavatory. Yes, ma'am, Marianne said, barely suppressing a smile. Row 48. The seats do not recline. Perfect, Stella said. She looked at Ryan. Get out of my suite, Ryan. We have a lot of paperwork to file when we land. I suggest you get some rest. It's going to be a hard life from here on out. Ryan stood up, his legs shaking. He looked at the ring on the floor, then at Stella. He wanted to scream, to rage, but he had nothing left. He was hollowed out. He turned and walked through the curtain, Jessica trailing behind him, weeping tears of pure rage. Stella watched them go. As the curtain fell back into place, she let out a long, shaky breath. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt exhausted. Arthur poured her a fresh glass of water. "Well handled, ma'am." "It's not over, Arthur," Stella said, staring at the closed curtain. "When we land in Geneva, the real work begins. I want to make sure he can never do this to another woman again." "We have the press release ready," Arthur noted. "Once the news breaks that Stella van der Hoven has reclaimed her family's assets and exposed the fraud at Sterling Solutions, he will be radioactive." Stella nodded. She turned her chair back to the window, looking out at the endless sea of clouds. "Good," she whispered. But outside the suite in the main cabin, the drama was far from over. As Ryan and Jessica made the walk of shame down the long aisle of the plane, moving from the champagne and caviar of first class, past the curious stares of business, and into the cramped, noisy reality of economy, the reality of their situation began to set in. And Ryan Sterling, a man who thought he had hit rock bottom, was about to discover that there was a basement. The velvet curtain that separated the first-class cabin from the rest of the plane was heavy, made of a thick, sound-dampening fabric. When Ryan pushed through it, leaving the scent of fresh orchids and the soft lighting of the private suite. Behind the heavy drape swung back into place with a definitive thud that felt like a prison cell door slamming shut. He stood there for a moment in the transition galley, blinking against the harsher, flatter LED lighting of the business class section. Jessica was right behind him, her breathing ragged and shallow, the sound of a woman on the verge of a hysterical breakdown. "Move!" she hissed, shoving him in the lower back. "Don't just stand there. You're blocking the way." Ryan stumbled forward. His legs felt like they were filled with lead. He was carrying his bespoke cashmere overcoat bundled in his arms because Marianne the purser had politely but firmly informed him that the first-class coat closet was at capacity and his belongings could no longer be stored there. They walked through business class. To Ryan, this was a torture devised by Dante himself. He saw faces he recognized, or thought he recognized. Was that the VP of marketing from a rival firm in Seat 8A? Was that venture capitalist from San Francisco in 9C? They were sipping wines and adjusting their lie-flat seats, oblivious to the tragedy that had just befallen Ryan Sterling. Or were they? To his paranoid mind, every glance felt like an indictment. He pulled his collar up, trying to hide his face, but there was nowhere to hide. "Keep moving, sir," a flight attendant said, ushering them past the galley and into the main cabin, economy. The air here was different. It was warmer, stuffier, smelling of stale coffee, recirculated air, and the distinct claustrophobic scent of too many bodies in too small a space. The hum of the engines was louder back here, a constant grinding roar that vibrated through the floorboards. They marched down the narrow aisle. Row 20, row 30, row 40. Passengers looked up from their tablets and paperbacks. Some looked annoyed at the disruption. Others looked curious about the man in the $5,000 suit, looking like he was walking to the gallows. "This is humiliating," Jessica whimpered, clutching her designer handbag to her chest as she squeezed past a beverage cart. "I can't believe this is happening. Ryan, do something." I can't," Ryan whispered, his voice hollow. "She owns the debt, Jess. She owns the bank." "You said she was a nobody," Jessica shrieked, her voice cracking, drawing stares from the entire back section of the plane. "You said she was a loser from Ohio." "Lower your voice," Ryan hissed, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch me." She pulled away violently. They finally reached row 48. It was the absolute last row of the aircraft, right up against the rear galley and the lavatories. The seats did not recline because the wall behind them prevented it. The constant whoosh of the toilet flushing was audible every few minutes. Their seats were 48B and 48E. They weren't even sitting together. They were both in middle seats, separated by the aisle and two other passengers. Ryan looked at seat 48B. Sitting in 48. A window was a teenage boy with large headphones asleep, his mouth open. Sitting in 48C aisle was a large man wearing a flannel shirt already spilling over the armrest. "Excuse me," Ryan muttered, trying to squeeze into the middle seat. The man in the flannel shirt looked up. He didn't move his legs much. Ryan had to contort his body, stepping over feet his expensive suit trousers, straining against the tight fit. He collapsed into the middle seat, his knees jamming instantly into the plastic back of the seat in front of him. He looked across the aisle. Jessica was wedged between a mother holding a crying infant and an elderly woman knitting a scarf. Jessica looked at him, her eyes burning with hatred. She mouthed one word: fraud. Ryan closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the upright seat. He tried to dissociate. He tried to tell himself this was a nightmare. He would wake up in his penthouse. "Hey," a voice from the seat in front of him. Ryan ignored it. "Hey, Sterling, is that you?" Ryan froze. He opened one eye. Through the gap between the seats, he saw a face turned around, looking at him. It was a man with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Ryan's stomach dropped. He knew that face. It was Elias Thorne. Elias had been one of the lead engineers at Sterling Solutions 2 years ago. He was a brilliant coder, a family man with 3 kids. When Ryan wanted to boost the company's quarterly margins to impress investors for a Series B round, he had fired Elias and the entire QA department without severance, claiming restructuring. He had done it via a Zoom call while he was on vacation in the Maldives. "Elias," Ryan breathed. "I thought that was you," Elias said, a slow, dark smile spreading across his face. He wasn't whispering. "I saw you get on. I saw you strutting up to first class. What happened, Ryan?" "Credit card declined." "Turn around, Elias," Ryan said, trying to summon some authority, but his voice was weak. "You know it's funny," Elias continued, leaning over the back of his seat so the people in the surrounding rows could hear. "When you fired me, you told me I needed to tighten my belt and face reality. You took my health insurance 3 weeks before my daughter's surgery." A hush fell over the immediate rows. The passengers sensed the tension. I didn't know about the surgery," Ryan stammered. "You didn't ask," Elias said coldly. "But hey, karma is a wheel, right? Look at you, squeezed in the middle seat next to the shitter, wearing a suit that costs more than my car." Elias pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked, panic rising. "I'm taking a picture, Ryan," Elias said, snapping a photo of Ryan sweating cramped and miserable in row 48. "The guys from the old dev team have a WhatsApp group. It's called Survivors of Sterling. They are going to love this." "You can't do that. It's invasion of privacy," Ryan shouted, reaching for the phone. "Don't touch him!" The man in the flannel shirt next to Ryan barked, shoving Ryan back into his seat with a heavy shoulder. "Sit down, pal." "He's harassing me," Ryan cried. "Sounds like you deserve it." The man in the flannel shirt grunted. He looked at Elias. "He fire you?" "Yeah," Elias said, "and withheld my last commission check." The man in the flannel shirt shook his head and looked at Ryan with pure disgust. "Scumbag." Ryan shrank down. He could hear the clicks of other phones now. He looked across the aisle. Jessica was deliberately looking away, pretending she didn't know him. She was scrolling through her phone, probably deleting every photo of them together from her Instagram. For the next 4 hours, Ryan Sterling sat in a hell of his own making. Every time the seatbelt sign dinged, he flinched. Every time someone walked to the bathroom, they bumped his shoulder. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't move. He could only think about the woman in the nose of the plane, sipping vintage wine, holding the ledger of his sins. He realized then that Stella hadn't just sued him. She hadn't just divorced him. She had orchestrated a dismantling of his soul. And they hadn't even landed yet. The descent into Geneva was violent. The snowstorm that had chased them across the Atlantic was now battering the Swiss Alps, causing the plane to shudder and drop in sickening intervals. In the rear of the aircraft, row 48. Ryan Sterling gripped the armrests until his knuckles turned white. Beside him, the man in the flannel shirt snored oblivious to the turbulence, and the man unraveling next to him. Ryan wasn't afraid of crashing. He was afraid of landing. Up in the nose of the plane, inside the private suite, the atmosphere was serene. Stella sat buckled in, watching the grey clouds whip past. Arthur Pendleton packed his briefcase with a satisfying click. "The ground team is ready, Ms. van der Hoven," Arthur said quietly. "The Geneva Cantonal Police have been briefed on the situation regarding the fraudulent collateral." Stella nodded, her expression unreadable. "Let's get this over with." The wheels slammed onto the tarmac, sending a spray of slush into the air. As the engines roared into reverse, thrust slowing the massive beast, Ryan felt a wave of nausea. "Maybe I can just run," he thought irrationally. "Maybe I can blend in with the ski tourists." The plane taxied to the gate, but the fasten seatbelt sign didn't turn off. Instead, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Geneva. Local authorities have requested that all passengers remain seated while we clear the first-class cabin. Thank you for your patience." A collective groan went through economy. Ryan shrank into his seat. He knew. Deep down, he knew. He stretched his neck, trying to see down the endless tunnel of the aisle. Far ahead, the velvet curtains parted. Stella emerged. She wore a sleek black trench coat and dark sunglasses, looking every inch the billionaire heiress. She didn't look back. She walked off the plane with the grace of a queen, disappearing into the jet bridge without a backward glance. She's gone. Ryan thought, his heart hammering. She left me here. Minutes passed. The air in the cabin grew stifling. Then the front door opened again. 3 officers boarded. They weren't flight crew. They wore dark blue uniforms emblazoned with Police Cantonale Genève. The cabin went silent. The officers moved with terrifying efficiency, bypassing the champagne-sipping passengers in business class and marching straight into the cramped quarters of economy. They didn't stop until they reached the very last row. "Monsieur Ryan Sterling?" the lead officer asked. His voice was cold, sharp as a razor. Ryan looked up, trembling. Yes. Look, if this is about the ticket upgrade." "You are under arrest," the officer announced, loud enough for the surrounding 10 rows to hear. "Charges include aggravated fraud, document forgery, and banking theft involving the Van der Hoven family trust." "That's a lie," Ryan shouted, scrambling up his knees, hitting the seat in front. "It's a civil dispute. It's a divorce. Forging securities for a Swiss bank is a criminal offense, monsieur," the officer said, spinning Ryan around. The handcuffs clicked shut, a cold metallic sound that signaled the end of Ryan's life as he knew it. "Jessica!" Ryan screamed, looking across the aisle at his fiancée. "Jessica, call the embassy. Tell them I'm being framed." A plainclothes inspector stepped up to Jessica. Mademoiselle Jessica Miller, we need you for questioning regarding the laundering of illicit funds. Jessica's face drained of color. She looked at Ryan, then at the officers, and her survival instinct kicked in. She clawed at her wrist. "I didn't know," she shrieked. "He lied to me. He told me he was rich." She ripped the diamond tennis bracelet off her wrist, the one Ryan had bought with the stolen loan money, and shoved it at the inspector. "Take it. It's evidence I'm a victim here." "You?" Ryan gasped. "Shut up, Ryan." She spat tears of rage streaming down her face. "You made me an accessory. I hope you rot." The officers hauled Ryan into the aisle. "Move." Now began the longest walk of Ryan Sterling's life. The walk of shame. He had to walk the entire length of the plane from the back of economy to the front exit. As he stumbled forward, shoelaces untied, suit rumpled and sweat-stained, the passengers became a jury. Phones were raised like weapons. Flashes blinded him. "That's him," someone whispered. "The guy who mocked his ex-wife." "Karma," another voice sneered, as he passed row 20. Elias Thorne, the engineer Ryan had fired without severance, leaned out into the aisle phone recording. "Smile, Ryan. The survivors of Sterling group chat sends their regards." Ryan hung his head, the humiliation burning his skin. He was marched past the empty luxury of first class, the scent of orchids mocking him one last time, and shoved out onto the jet bridge. But they didn't take him to the terminal. They led him down the metal stairs to the freezing tarmac. A police van waited, its blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. 50 yards away, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom was idling. The chauffeur held the back door open. Stella stood there. She hadn't left yet. The officer tugged at Ryan's arm, but Ryan dug his heels in. He stared at her. He wanted her to scream at him, to gloat, to show some emotion that proved he still mattered to her. Stella turned. She looked at him across the expanse of grey concrete. Her face was a mask of absolute indifference. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him as if he were a stranger or a minor inconvenience she had already dealt with. She ducked into the warm leather interior of the Rolls-Royce. The heavy door closed with a solid, final thud. The car pulled away, gliding smoothly toward the private exit. "In the van," the officer barked, shoving Ryan's head down. He was thrown onto the metal bench of the paddy wagon. The door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. As the siren began to wail, piercing the cold Swiss morning, Ryan Sterling sat alone in the dark, finally realizing the truth. He had wanted to be part of the Van der Hoeven world. Now, as the prisoner of their bank's jurisdiction, he belonged to them completely. 6 months later, the grey skies of Geneva had turned to a brilliant, crisp spring. But inside the utilitarian walls of the Champ d'Olon prison, the seasons were irrelevant. Ryan Sterling sat on the edge of his narrow bunk, staring at a small, flickering television set mounted high on the wall of the common area. He looked 10 years older. His bespoke suits were gone, replaced by a drab grey uniform. His hair was thinning, and the arrogance that once defined his posture had been replaced by a permanent slump of defeat. The news channel was broadcasting a segment on the Global Business Summit taking place in Davos. The reporter standing in the snow was speaking breathlessly. And the highlight of the summit today was the keynote address by the newly appointed chairwoman of the Van der Hoeven Group. After a year of restructuring, the conglomerate has posted record profits largely driven by their new logistics division, Ether Systems. The camera cut to the podium. There she was, Stella. She looked radiant. She wore a white power suit, her hair styled in soft waves. She spoke with confidence and grace, commanding the room of world leaders and CEOs. She wasn't the mousy woman Ryan had bullied. She wasn't even the vengeful ex-wife on the plane. She was a titan. "We built Ether," Stella said to the cameras. "Not just on code, but on integrity. Transparency is the currency of the future, and those who try to counterfeit it will always fall behind." A few inmates laughed. "Hey, Sterling," one of them jeered, throwing a crumpled paper cup at him. "Isn't that your wife?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. His trial had been swift and brutal. The Swiss courts did not look kindly on banking fraud, with Arthur Pendleton providing a mountain of evidence and Jessica testifying against him in exchange for immunity and a ticket back to the US. Ryan had been crushed. The forensic audit Stella had threatened on the plane unearthed everything: the embezzled funds, the forged signatures, the hidden offshore accounts. He was sentenced to 8 years in a Swiss correctional facility, followed by immediate deportation and a lifetime ban from entering the European Union. But the financial ruin was worse than the prison time. Stella hadn't just sued him. She had obliterated his legacy. Sterling Solutions was liquidated. His name was synonymous with failure. A popular Netflix documentary about the airport arrest had just dropped, turning him into a global meme of hubris. Even Elias Thorne, the engineer he fired, had given an interview that went viral, calling Ryan the Emperor, with no clothes and no code. On the TV screen, the reporter asked Stella one final question as she left the stage. "Ms. van der Hoeven, do you have any comment on the sentencing of your ex-husband Ryan Sterling, which was finalized yesterday?" Stella paused. She looked directly into the camera lens. For a split second, Ryan felt like she was looking right through the screen into his cold, miserable cell. "Ryan who?" she asked, a small, polite smile playing on her lips. She turned and walked away, flanked by security, disappearing into the flashbulbs of her bright, limitless future. Ryan stared at the static screen long after the segment ended. He realized then that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. He hadn't just lost his money. He hadn't just lost his freedom. He had become a footnote in her biography, a cautionary tale told to business students. He lay back on his bunk and closed his eyes, but the sound of the jet engines and her final words on the plane echoed in his mind forever. And that is the story of how Ryan Sterling learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never underestimate someone just because they stay silent. He mistook Stella's kindness for weakness and her silence for stupidity. In the end, he lost everything: his company, his freedom, and his dignity, because he was too blinded by his own ego to see the powerhouse standing right next to him. It's a powerful reminder that true wealth doesn't shout, it whispers. And karma doesn't miss. What did you think of Stella's revenge? Did Ryan deserve 8 years, or was the public humiliation enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have an even crazier tale of betrayal and redemption coming up in the next video that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're really talking to. See you next time.